shining bright. Guide me through the dark and fight. The tricks await, the dance begins. In your embrace where the magic spins. Kitsune.
Konnichiwa, yokoso. Hello and welcome to this tutorial how I paint the Kitsune for Conquest by Parabellum Wargames. My goal was a natural, kind of traditional appearance with browns, with light tones, desaturated color tones, and of course an overall good appearance. I tend to go with the traditional appearance of a Kitsune with this whitish fur at tails with red tips, some additional red makeup, then a more traditional kimono robe with those cherry blossoms on the pinkish tone. I left two foxes from the miniatures separate, didn't build and painted them, cause the tree in the background took so much place that I need to make some cuts here and there. So if you want to go with this tutorial, there are timestamps for the different parts, like metal parts and like fur or the base, or how to apply the clump foliage. Feel free to skip here and there. And for your amusement, this is a rather long form tutorial, so grab yourself a cup of tea, a snack, or get comfy and keep on this bumpy ride. Let us start right into the tutorial. First and foremost, this is the Subassembly stage. I've built the foxes, 3 of them separately. The one with the curling tail even got his tail separate. The 3D printed tree in the background is from Epic Basing, put to the base with cork and sand, and I pinned some parts. Took a rather long pin into the Kitsune so that I can pin her down later to a small hole in the base, and assemble all the stuff later so that I can paint it better now. After black primer, I start with a natural tone, a brown tone right out of the airbrush. This is Charred Brown by Vallejo Game Air. This is a more mid-tone reddish brown as a good base coat for the base. The tree, of course, it's as you have seen it, it's gonna be a brown tree, and to round it all up, I spray paint the Kitsune herself in this brown as well to give a good foundation color-wise for all the stuff. As you can see here, I pinned the Kitsune into a cork piece as a kind of improvised painting handle, so that I didn't need to stick my fingers to the miniature all the time and maybe rub off some of the airbrush paint. All the pieces are painted. The foxes got their natural fur tone here as well, because as you could have seen, they are brownish, reddish foxes, so this is very important. If you want to go with white, gray, blue, whatever colored foxes, you don't need to spray them brown. Of course, all this stuff is additional, as I say all the time. When everything is dried, I switch to a brighter reddish brown tone. This is Burnt Umber by Vallejo Modelaire. This is a kind of highlight color or a mid-tone color for the tree to give it more definition and figure out where some of the further highlights should go, or how the color grading should be combined on the miniature. Cause I've went into this miniature and this tutorial relatively blind. There was no Japanese traditional style miniature I've painted before, rather no Yoroni miniature. So this was an example that I hope paid off in the end. So spraying the tree and the foxes so that they get a bit more of this reddish brown fur tone. Next up, Burned Umber with Orange Fire. This is a roughly 1-to-1 mix right out of the airbrush. Some minor amount of thinner applied, and I use this one for the fox's fur, and hope that this would be the final color tone out of the airbrush for the reddish fur. And as you could have seen, I left the belly and the tip of the tail rather untouched with this step, cause there would be black and or white in the future, so I don't need to paint it in this color. This wouldn't make much sense for those small foxes. Next up, I took Wolf Grey. This is a off-white color tone from Vallejo Game Air, a light bluish off-white, and I get on a kinda pre-highlight step, get out some of these areas where I think the color needs to be applied on the upper parts for maybe the kimono robe and the Kitsune's fur parts. I tend to go rather high up into the brightness, moving gradually from this soft smoky bluish gray you've seen before to a nearly white, and work my way around so that the color I apply later got an easier finish. This color would be applied to the tails as well, and you can see me later skipping back and forth between the different colors, cause there is a minor amount of overspray onto the base parts, but I guess it's not that bad. There is nothing like an intricate detail I mess up. There is just the base scenery where fur, tufts and flock will go on, so you can repair it and it wouldn't be a great deal. On the tails as well, work your way up a bit from this bluish smoky appearance to a rather bright off-white where the color would hit, or where you think the color would be the brightest. And keep in mind that you can airbrush the foxes from underneath as well. There is the belly, the inner side of the legs, something around the mouth and eyes, and the bottom part of the tail got white as well. So now I added roughly 1 part wolf gray and 1 part dead white from Vallejo into the mix, and add an additional highlight. As you can see in the left upper corner, I've totally screwed up to put the correct color there. Sorry for that, but you can see the color code later in the tutorial. This is to apply a more stark contrasting highlight with a rather bright off-white. To get some color in the mix, I put aside the base and foxes and take care of the kimono. This is a lovely pinkish color. This is called squid pink, applied in some thin layers through the airbrush. And you can see here the previous step with the white gradient gives me room to spray this color very gentle. If you go with a rather vibrant color over a dark base coat, you need to struggle a bit to get it this vibrant and this desaturated light in the tone. So I highly recommend going on a whitish pre-highlighting before you apply vibrant colors. This is squid pink with charred brown in a roughly equally mix. I spray this from underneath some of the parts and into these small recesses in the kimono and on her feet. Cause I seen some images where the white fur of the overall body tends to go darker onto the feet, so I want to apply this inspiration here. And this one is a kinder desaturated highlight for the pinkish tones, so that I can get some variation here and there. Next up, I apply some Pru Pink into the previous mix. This is yeah, a flashy, rather beige tone for a highlight, and pick out some areas here and there. So as you can see here in the left up corner, this is Squid Pink. This is 76.013 and a 71.408 Pru Pink. This is a nice combination because I couldn't find a straight out of the bottle color for this highlight. This often tend to go too bright into the pinkish parts, and this is a lovely desaturated color tone. Next up, even more Pru Pink into the mix to get an even brighter color tone for some additional highlights here and there, where you think they would fit the most. Keep in mind the kimono don't need to get so many highlights onto the back, cause the tail would obstruct most of the areas, but maybe into the chest area where the kimono is folded over each other, onto the arms, and maybe in front the cloth part that is flowing between the legs. There are some cool places where you can add highlights, and this one is even more brightened up with some dead white into the mix, so that we get roughly a 1:1:1 mix here: Squid Pink, Pru Pink, and dead white for a final highlight, final airbrush highlight onto the Kitsune's robe. To bring back the fur color tone on the areas where I sprayed over a bit, I apply another coat of wolf gray onto the white-ish parts. And this is my trick for most of the white areas. Apply a off-white and then just use the color tone of pure white for the highest and sharpest highlights. So the area would look white to the eye, but it is not like, oh, it is over-saturated white and it's all gleaming and glowing. It is white, but it doesn't harass the eye. Next up, there is wolf gray mixed with some dead white, where I forgot to add this one as well into the left up corner. I'm a bit lazy this time, sorry for that, but I hope you can excuse this one. So use this mixed color tone for some highlights here and there, for example onto the knees and the ankles, right into the face, and on the ears tips, and apply this one another coat of pure dead white into face, ears, tips, onto the knees, onto the top parts of the knees, and some of these muscle strands that you can see here and there into the legs. So next up, we are ready to apply the real feet color that I told you before. Messed up this one a bit. This is charred brown onto the feet. Try to only hit the feet and not darken down the kimono or the rest of the legs as well, because you need to repair this. This costs time, and we don't got time. If you overspray a bit, grab a damp brush and wipe away the paint. This is possible, as you can see here. Next up, refine the step with a charred brown and NATO black mix. So this is a anthracite color tone, and the further we go to the toes of the feet, the darker the fur should look like, in my opinion. So I apply it to the tips of the feet. Going on to red. This is a mix of wolf gray and red. You see in the airbrush it is a rather pinkish magenta tone. This is the first color tone, so that the red, the pure red, when I spray it onto the white, doesn't look that pinkish. That is a kinder workaround, that it looks more natural, and I can get a better transition to the white fur parts of the tails. Working my way around, starting on the tips, and get a feeling on how deep the red section should go into the tail. After this, I apply pure red from Vallejo in the same technique, starting on the tip of the tails and working into the main parts. Of course, leaving some of the previously sprayed mid-tone through, showing through, that there is a nice, smooth transition. Next up, I add some dead white into the mix, rather 50-50, and apply this to the tips of the tail. This is a more orangey tone now, but this would be a good highlight because I want to go into something like Wild Rider Red and Fire Dragon Bright from Citadel, so this would fit perfectly for a transitional color. Another coat of dead white to remove some of the overspray. Yes, I could pretend it didn't happen, but I think it's just only fair that I tell you that yes, this would happen when you use an airbrush and don't mask. And it's not the end of the world. You can repair the paint. Or you can repair the paint job when you spray over. So keep that in mind all the time. So now, as I have repaired some of the overspray, the airbrush could go away and it's time for some brush work. I start with repairing some of the kimono's areas with a full grim pink. This is the most close color I got from Citadel, from the acrylic range that fits the kimono's color, and I repair some of the areas where I think I sprayed a bit too much of the wolf gray for the fur, and maybe some of those areas where I think, yeah, there needs to be more definition with a more sharp contrast, and I apply this paint there. Next up, I grab my wet palette and add a bit of white scar into the full grim pink for roughly about 1:1, and apply this one as a first highlight. The highlights on cloth on my miniatures are like color gradients, defects where maybe the textiles of the cloth are roughened up, so I work with small lines and minimal dots here and there, and don't work with these rather ultra smooth transitions that other painters use. I like this more gritty, roughed up stage, so I apply this one in to the cloth highlight as well. You can see here on the back side, yes, it's a bit too bright to see it that good, but this is a problem of the color, because this pink is very bright, and it's a nice experience for me, because I didn't paint such bright colors that often. Next up, Fulgrim Pink with White Scar in a roughly 1:2 mix. So 1 part pink, 2 parts white to brighten it up even more. And work around the miniatures in the same technique. Some small dots and small lines on the highlight parts, and you can get some brush strokes into the colored areas, because this would be another nice textile defect as well, to give these flowing, smooth cloth areas a rather interesting detail. As you worked your way around the miniature, this is another coat of the textile defect highlight, with now a maybe a 1:3 or 1:4 mix with White Scar, so it's very bright. And now it's the part. The brighter you go with this, you roughen up the cloth even more. The more you use those bright highlights, the older the textile would look later. So it depends on personal taste. Don't overdo it. It's a rather chaotic neutral Japanese demon that manifests under a magical tree, and a old hag out of an Ukrainian or maybe Serbian wood. Next up is Ulthuan Grey. This is a off-white bluish grayish color, and I apply it onto the white fur to work up some of the overspray areas that I didn't hit before, and for example apply it into areas where I think the fur need to be a bit darker, so that the next highlight would contrast better. This is just a small workaround and hiccup for areas that I didn't hit well enough previously. Keep in mind that you can use the Ulthuan Grey onto the tails as well. This would be a fun thing to remove some overspray and add additional highlights here and there. Then I grab Apothecary White. This is a Citadel contrast paint, and I applied it into the recesses of the white parts to give it a rather transparent grayish shadow. Important to know, if you go too deep into the shadow or too dark into the shadow on white areas, it will look comically and maybe sticks out like a Thor thumb, and I like to get a more transparent light appearance onto this shadowy areas. After I finished the step on the tails, I grab the Kitsune's body as well and apply this Apothecary White shadow onto the recesses that are molded by the muscle strains on the legs, and as well in between the fingers and on the eyes, nose, around the nose and the mouth, and of course around the hair, so that you get a rather smooth transition from the white of the face onto the later applied black of the hair. Next up is Carabog Crimson. I repeat the step on the tails as well on the reddish parts, and as you can imagine, a transparent grayish shadow isn't good for the red tips of the tails, so I apply Carabog Crimson here for a bit of a darkened down shadow in between these small strains of hair. I use the Caraba Crimson as well to outline the small armor panels and stuff, so that I don't need to paint those straight on onto the pinkish parts with the black color, because if there's a small line of this dark red shadow, this would be easier to paint later for me. This is a thing I learned over years and years and years. And as well, you can apply Caraba Crimson onto the recesses and then go on with a damper brush and get a stroke into the recess, so you can wet blend it there. Up to the armor panels, this is the first coat, yes, a pure black. This is Abaddon Black by Citadel. This just applied straight out of the pot onto these small armor pieces and these belly belt thing that she's wearing. After this, it is Corvus Black, an anthracite color tone, my main black tone, because I don't like this really stark contrasting black that much. I like the more grayish Corvus Black way more. As you can see, I've painted the hair in this color as well. You could theoretically, if you want to add another color, go on for a more bluish appearance in the hair, or greenish or reddish. I go with this more neutral, slightly bluish tone. I've highlight the whole things, but it's just your personal taste. Next up, I use Ashen Gray, straight from the wet palette. Of course, it's thinned down a bit, and I can manage the flow of the color a bit better. And I pick all these small highlights here and there on the armor, and some of the strings on the hair with this grayish color. I apply it to the wet palette because I know that I will mix it up, and this is a good way to start applying the color here. So the small strings here and there into the hair, as you can see here. I tend to go a bit brighter onto the hair, because I think there is more area around the head where you can apply highlights compared to these armor panels, where there are the small fabric pieces as well that are colored later. Next up, I mix in a bluish gray. This is Fenrisian gray in roughly equal parts for a next highlight, and this is the previously mentioned kinda bluish highlight. Going around the small armor panels on the sides and the top parts. Here are no really roughed up areas like on the cloth, because these small tiny armor panels that bonded together are that small that I don't think there need to be micro scratches and stuff like this. Maybe on the other Yoroni units I used these techniques for micro scratching, but you can write it down into the comment section below if I should go the route to get each Yoroni unit a individual tutorial in the future. So going on with the hair, you can see it here. Some small lines, a bit of cleanup here and there where I messed up, but just small lines to improve these well-crafted hair. Next, add a bit more of a Frisian gray into the mix, so that it's more bluish, and we rework the same steps but keep back the amount of highlights. And maybe just hit the areas where you think the light would hit the miniature from your light source. In my case, the miniatures are mostly lighting up by a light source and an imaginary light source that's above the miniature, so that all the areas that are on top of the miniatures are bright with highlights. But maybe you go with the left corner there is a light source, so it would change the areas that would be brightened up, as well as these final highlights that you apply here. And keep in mind that you don't forget the hair. You can go with another color if you like, or you can leave it. It's up to you. The armor get a final highlight with Phrygian gray, just some small dots here and there to over saturate some of the edges and give a good bright contrasting color to the later applied or orangey red that you will see in the next step. Now I take myself Dawnstone. This would be the highlight color for the hair to get a slight differentiation between the black grayish hair and the black bluish armor highlight tint. But this is just a so minimal change, I guess most people wouldn't even recognize this one. Now we go on with a dark red tone. In my case it is a corn red, and I paint these small fabric strains on the armor. I guess it's fabric where the armor is knotted together, and there is this small piece of belt on the belly, and it's going around on the back. And then if you like, you can give her some makeup and paint the lips with this color. And going on with Wazdaka red, this is a not so bright or desaturated reddish tone by Citadel. That is my mid-tone for all these red areas, and if I recall correctly, the final tone on the lips, the final highlight, so that it does not look too comically over highlighted. And yes, I know, such small highlights are tedious work. Make your head free and work around the miniature. This color is applied as well onto the tails. This is the mid-tone highlight on the tails. I paint it right now as I got the paint pot open, and work with the hair strains, as you can see, and paint more highlights onto the tail's tip, and even less where the color transition from red to white is happening. The next highlight is painted with Wild Rider red, a more orangey red tone. Here you can work out these small details by the curls on the robe and some additional highlights onto the armor panels. Keep in mind that you only paint the upper half of this detail with this color, because you wouldn't see the corn red or Wild Rider red through when you paint too much, and then you get a step of tedious work that isn't necessary. So take your time for this. And as well, paint the strains on the fur, or better say on the tail, up to the tip in this color. The next color is Troll Slayer Orange. Yes, it's going more into this yellowish orangey color for a nice contrast onto the pink of the kimono. And I guess this would be my go-to color into the future when I paint more of this Japanese style Yoroni armor. This blackish, slightly bluish highlights, contrasting against these reddish, slightly orangey highlight parts. As well, work your way around. Don't forget the tips of the tail. I guess I don't show it this time because you know the game and you know what to do. As a final highlight, I apply Fire Dragon Bright. You can see the previously with the Troll Slayer orange highlighted tips of the tails here, and I apply some minor details with Fire Dragon Bright to go even more into this slightly orange color tone. I want to go desaturated for most of my army, my Yoroni army, so I thought out this would be a nice touch, that the reddish tips of the tail are going into this really desaturated orange tone, rather than going into a what is it, pinkish tone. If you go red into straight white, this wouldn't fit my aesthetically pleasing here brain. Next up is Lucamanzella Orange, a rather new color tone I found. It is even more desaturated than Fire Dragon Bright and even more neat to the eye. And I apply another coat of highlights here and there. I know this is rather overkill, but I guess the Yoroni is the right faction to go for this appearance. As I painted my first Conquest army that I painted really bright and colorful are the Sorcerer Kings. The Yoroni are colorful as well, and not that uniform, but they are more desaturated and smooth in all their colorfulness. Is this one a word? I don't know. I guess you know what I mean by this. So now that I'm done with the reddish and orange parts, I go back to the fur parts, the whitish parts, and I grab Offwhite Gray to define the muscles on legs and arms and in the face, and hit the upper areas. Keep in mind, my way to go for white parts is going on a desaturated, slightly bluish gray, and then hit the white only in the highlights, that it doesn't look like a bright white surface or area, that there is room to define the details. The face is the thing that I'm not proud of on this miniature, if I be totally honest. Maybe I repaint the face in the future, but right now, for a release of the faction and the miniature and this video, I guess it's good enough. Here, keep in mind, the foxes are not done yet. They can be touched up with those colors as well. Paint in some small lines onto the white parts to give the appearance of small hair that are sticking out of the fur and reflecting the light a bit more than the rest of the fur. Next up is White Scar. Yes, this is true white, and this is the highlight. The sharpest edges in the body and on the muzzle strains are highlighted with this. For example, you can see here the area regarding the knee, and then I paint in some small lines on the bigger surfaces to yeah, kind of trick the eye into thinking this is fur. And then pick out the fingers and the small knuckles and maybe the tips of the ears and the nose, the cheekbones and the chin. And then the strange part on her is these small ornamentation on her forehead that if I think back, I'd rather remove with a sharp X-Acto knife, because it irritates my eye that there is an additional thing on her forehead that draws the attention from the main part of the face, which is the eyes and the nose. Speaking of eyes and nose, yes, the fox and the tails got highlights as well. Pick out the highest appearing strains of fur in the tails and some small lines on the ears and the bellies of the foxes to get more of this furry, fluffy feeling with small lines rather than full area details. Picking out the few metals that the miniature gets, I start with the Balthasar Gold. This is my standard gold recipe. This is a more of a reddish gold tone as a base color, and apply it to all the metallic areas that need to go golden. And yes, to be honest, I tend to go more for a brassy tone on my golds, but this is totally fine. If you want to go on a yellowish gold route, you can do this one as you please. Adding the next color onto the metals is Rune Lord Brass. Yes, the brassiness that I've told you before. Apply this one as a main color tone on the areas, so some of the Balthasar Gold is showing through here and there. But this is the main, the mid-tone for all these areas. As I'm a sucker for true metallic metals, I brighten them up even more with some Rune Fang steel. This is silver for a highlight. Yes. If you take a golden piece, light could reflect from some areas so that it looks whitish silvery on these areas. Keep this in mind. This is a nice trick to give some more pleasing experience to the eye onto the spectator. After this, some more ornamentation. Onto the kimono. I start with a mix of equal Wasdaka red and these fulgrim pink, and apply it onto the kimono in small dots that imitate some cherry blossom leaves. As you can see here, maybe there are 4 leaves in an area that try to emulate a blossom, and I tried this pattern on the back side of the miniature. If it doesn't look that good, it's not that great of a thing to repaint the back side, that's mostly obscured by the tails, but I liked it and applied it onto the rest of the miniature. Apply these small cherry blossom pattern on the raised areas, onto the recesses and folds, and get a nice placement here and there. And after this, I apply Corvus Black mixed with Fulgrim Pink as these small strains that combine the small blossoms into a plant that creeps around the kimono, so to say. And always keep in mind, paint with a sharp tip, that the line is really small. If you mess up this part, that the cherry blossom and the plant structures don't look light and thin, it could look like bleh, and you don't want it. When you're ready with this part, we need to define the blossoms a bit more. So I take Wild Rider Red and hit some of these cherry blossom parts with this color to give it a bit of a color variation in the pattern or within the pattern. And you can add this color to simulate the more brighter areas. So maybe on the upper parts, on some folds on there, you can hit it with Wild Rider Red and leave the cherry blossoms and the recesses in the previously painted color. Do this one as well with Corvus Black to define these small plant strains a bit more. And if you're gonna go for a maybe rose thorn pattern, you can stick out some small points of this black to imitate the thorns of a rose. There you can see the backside, and this is all I've done for this pattern, or the most part that I've done for the pattern. Then, as a last final touch-up, I add a small dot of a Ulthuan Grey in the middle of each cherry blossom, and some of those small dots around the color pattern to give it a more of a sparkly and mystical appearance that maybe is added into the fabric. Done with the kimono, it is time for some brown. In this case, this is the brush she's holding. The brush is painted in dried bark completely. Just simply paint it on as a base coat for the brush, and you can touch up the feet a bit if you like. Then there is the scroll as well, the scroll that she's writing something on. I have hit it up with dried bark where the hand is connected to the scroll. Of course, there's some white overspray, and I used dried bark to define the fox's features. So there is a line around the ears, on the paws, the nose, and I guess around the eye. If you look for pictures of animals, you can see that there is color variation, and if you paint those, they look more natural on the display or on the gaming table. Next up is Kitsune Flesh Tone. This one is to define the paws of the Kitsune a bit more, to give a mid-tone to the brush's handle. And you can also highlight the paws and the ears of the fox if you want. Here I grab Thor Brown, final highlight on the Kitsune's feet, and final highlight on the brush, if I recall correctly. As you can see, I hit up the small nails, the claws as well on the feet, because I will highlight them later, and with Gotho Brown this is a good base tone. Next up, the brush's tip is painted with Corvus Black, finished with a slight touch-up of Ashen Grey. If she writes down differently colored symbols or scripture on her scroll, I would add another color onto the tip of the brush, but mine are mostly blackish signs, so I guess it's okay when the full tip of the brush is black. And as you can see, there was a small step of Baneblade Brown as a final highlight on the handle of the brush. I totally forget this one. We're going on to the foxes. Apply some small lines in a furry pattern on the fox's upper side with Morn Fang Brown. This is a reddish or rusty brown. And maybe you can define some features or around the face, and redo this step with the damp brush and scrag brown again to give more of this natural furry appearance to the foxes. Cause keep in mind, this should not look like a painted plastic miniature or resin miniature. This should look like a small fox in a scenery, a real natural fox in a small nature scenery. And he can chew the scenery if he likes to. After all, these small tiny foxes are highlighted with this. I use Steel Legion Drab as a base color for the scroll and just apply it straight from the pot around in a nice even coat to give a good canvas to the symbols I paint in later. Maybe I could have pinned the scroll part to give it a small handle while I'm painting, but I'm stupid and I think about this stuff when it's too late, so I go with the flow and stick the small paper scroll within my big thumb and my big index finger. Next up, as I got Steel Legion Drab on hand, I dry brush the base. You know, dry brushing, get some paint on a long bristled flat brush, wipe it off on a paper towel, and then kinda scrape the brush across the surface that you want to be dry brushed, and the color only would stick on the upmost parts. This is called dry brushing, as you can see here. Nothing special, just a simple technique. And repeat this one with the Bane Blade Brown for some more definition on the higher parts. Keep in mind there would be flak, tufts, plants and stuff added to the base later, so maybe you don't need to overdo it with the dry brushing and stuff. Of course, there will be many green dots on there. Another coat of dry brushing with Karak stone, mostly on the edges on the of the base, and these small stone thingy the tree is growing on. And then going back to Steel Legion Drab for these small skulls I placed around the base. Yes, I'm a sucker for this. Wargaming miniatures need skulls, and those skulls are a good tool to give an indication how big this Kitsune is. They are scaled like a regular human. Okay, they're scaled like a regular human in 28mm miniature ranges and not in this 38, but the Kitsune looks even bigger with these small skulls on the base. Next up is Bane Blade Brown. Hit up all these small bone areas, but leave some of these Steel Legion Drab showing through on the borders and maybe in the eye sockets and in some of the crevices that are in the bones here and there. If you don't got any bones, just skip a bit further to the scroll. I know. This is just a fancy detail that I need to get onto my bases. Oh, and just don't forget, there are claws that need to be painted. I paint those as I've painted the other bones in the same steps, so keep that in mind. You apply Bane Blade Brown to the scroll as well in horizontal small strokes, that you get a bit of an uneven surface or uneven appearance on the surface, cause this is paper that's maybe handmade, I guess, and handmade paper don't look that pristine and clean as mechanically done paper. So this would be a nice thing to apply this look for the scroll. Next up is Karak Stone, applied onto the bone, the claws, the fingernails of the Kitsune, and onto the scroll. I guess there is nothing special, just apply a highlight. You can see it a bit better on the bones right here. This color is used to grab the spectator's attention and focus it more onto the middle part of the skulls, onto the eyebrows and stuff like this, and onto the middle part of the chest or rib cage that's on the back of the base. Apply a samey pattern of horizontal strokes onto the scroll, and for this I've started to draw these strokes onto the scroll's edge, that maybe the inner part of the scroll or the scroll's surface is a bit darker than the edges. Maybe you can see it here a bit better. And work your way around all this paper, or this paper trail, badoons. Next up, on the bones and the claws, I use a Shapti bone as a highlight color and use this one to draw the attention even more to the mid part of the bones, teeth, the recess around the eye and the nose. But other than just use a Shapti bone for the scroll, I go to a color that's a dark grayish beige, or desaturated grayish beige. This is a Rakath flesh, and I draw in some more additional horizontal lines, as you can see here. This is more centered on the edges. Of course, for one, there will be some Japanese signs and scripture applied in the middle of the scroll. And second, these look like roughed up edges, roughed up paper edges that give it a more natural appearance. So after the scroll is dried, I use Corvus Black. This is applied to a wet palette because I need a thin line, a thin coat, and I get a reference on my computer screen for some symbols that are used in traditional Japanese writing, and I try to emulate those for something like spirit and nature and fire and things like this. And in addition, there are some script work, some lines, some regular writing with a rather small symbols. Those are applied a bit like regular writing, but it is applied from top to bottom. Normally in Western culture we use our scripture to write from left to right and from up to down. And in Japanese traditional culture, it is like from right to left and up to down, or top to bottom. So I try to emulate this in case here with these small lines, scripture lines that you see. You can add additional colors like some red symbols or blue symbols if you like multicolor writing. There's no problem, but I found it was more pleasing to the eye that there are small symbols on the scroll rather than some like 4 to 5 large big symbols that are part of the studio painting. So, and here comes the idea, oh, maybe I add a bit of color into the writing. So I took Wazdaka red, thinned it down with a bit of water, and reworked some of these small scripture pieces, so that maybe on the last writing session the Kitsune wrote down some red symbols, or maybe she can influence the brush by a magical way that it would paint red. Next up, the gemstones and the shining wound in the tree. I start with a base coat of Nocturne Green. It's a dark, a bit turquoisey green. This is for the jewelry that would contrast with the cloth, and I painted into the recess on the tree. Next up is Lupical Green, a bit brighter in this color spectrum, and I paint a gem technique. If you like a separate video on gems, just let me know. In this case, if you pretend the gem is a round place or a round surface, you paint the brighter colors in the left and the right down facing corner, and in the left upwards corner you leave it dark and use just one reflecting point of color in this dark area. And I work my way through Sybarite green and gauze green and a final dot of paint in Uthuan green there. And on the tree I use the color in an inverted motion. The deeper the recess is, the brighter the color should be, so that there is an energy glow from within the tree that is shining outwards. And as I said, maybe I give you an additional gemstone tutorial in the future. With all those features done, it is time for the base. And one part of the base is the tree. I take dried bark and a brush, a stippling sponge. This is a blister sponge, maybe delivered to you with metal miniatures or resin miniatures as a packing material, and I apply this dried bark in a stippling motion from underneath the tree branches to give it the appearance of a bit of shadow. Next up is Kitsune fleshstone, stippled on the upper parts of the tree to remove a bit of the dried bark and give a natural highlight. The sponge got the benefit that there is no real surface coverage. It is all the small stipples, and some areas in between is showing through, so that you get a more natural appearance here. You could theoretically add some greenish layers on the on one side of the tree for this moss that is building up on the northern side of a tree, I guess. I left it here because there is so much foliage in the treetop, so that there is enough green in my opinion. Next up is stippling with Gorthor brown as a highlight, mainly around these bigger recesses on the tree's stem and around this glowing face that you see on the tree. So as I'm done with stippling, it is time for the base. There are several materials I use. There are these tufts from Green Stuff World, from Gamer's Grass and whatever manufacturer you're using. But before we apply those, I glue in the Kitsune with super glue. There is super glue underneath the miniature and on the backside where the tail would connect. And then I use Gamer's Grass Dense Green and Dry Green Tufts to give the base of the vegetation. If you think that the tufts are too big, you can cut it down with an X-Acto knife onto forming smaller patches like I've doing this here. Keep in mind that you maybe got a self-repairing cutting mat at your working space, that there is no problem of cutting your desk. Just take a pair of tweezers, grab the tuft, a small dot of super glue, and push it gently onto the base that it would stick, and leave the super glue plenty of time to dry, cause there's a chemical reaction if you apply white glue to the still wet super glue surface, and as we apply some flock later we need white glue. So keep that in mind and make sure that the super glue got maybe 1 or 2 hours to dry, cause even if it's super glue, if it's puddled up like here, it could take some time to dry completely, and you don't want to mess up the miniature at this stage when you got so much time and effort within already. For the Yoroni, I went to the route for nature and lush forests, so I apply a bit more of those tufts here and there than I rather do on other miniatures. This is personal taste. If you want to go for a totally different base design, like a lava base or a desert, you can skip this part of the miniature painting process, of course, but I thought I show you the full process in some videos, and this is one of those. Next up, after everything is dried completely, I use some wet diluted white glue, apply it on some of the surfaces. This is Dirt Flock Foundation by Gale Force 9. This serves as a foundation for a more mossy, bushy grass plane, and it is like moss that's forming in recesses underneath stones, and maybe even on the trees, on the bark, on the quote-unquote northern side of this correctly, I don't know for sure. So apply the white glue on all the surfaces you want to get some of the flock to stick. Maybe here on the tree as well. There are these small crevices with stones where there maybe could add some vegetation, and then gently flocking this material from above, and just hit the base with some gentle strokes to remove the excess flock. Then there is a rather philosophical approach. Leave this coat of white glue to dry completely, or just add on the next color. On small miniatures and on line miniatures, I tend to leave everything to dry completely before I move on. Here it is still a bit wet, so that I can blend the flock into each other. This is Spring Undergrowth by Gale Force 9, and I apply it with a pair of tweezers cause it's more of a bit of a clumpy flock, so that I can focus better where the flock goes, and that I didn't get too much excess that I need to wipe away later. This could be used as small mossy patches or as small mini bushes, and maybe I add some colorful flower tufts later to the mix when I've painted some more Yoroni, and I get a feeling for the bases a bit more, because most of this base is taken up by the tree, so there is not that much space for vegetation. As you can see here, there is some Gale Force 9 or Green Stuff World leaf litter applied as well with white glue, and now I use Gamer's Grass paper plants. Those are bent into shape. This is the bracken, there is elephant ear, there is the dump cane and the lilies and stuff like this that I use for my bases, so that it looks like a real lush forest ground, and vegetation is sprouting everywhere. On these brackens, for example, you can use super glue to glue down the tips of the fern so that it would not wiggle around and break off that easily. This is just personal taste, as you can imagine already. And of course, keep the white glue dried completely before you apply this, because it's the same way when you apply super glue at first and then go with white glue. It would dry up whitish in light small white sausages. It would be the other way around. If you start with still wet white glue and apply super glue later, it would have the same effect. So work around, use the tweezers or the tip of an X-Acto knife to bend the bracken to the connecting point where you want it to connect, and add paper plants here and there. As you can see here, I like this bracken to conceal the skulls a bit, but only a bit. You should still see the skulls, but not on plain sight. So there is more of a visual experience. After everything is glued and dried up, I hit this leaf litter I applied previously with a fulgrim pink to emulate a cherry blossom tree losing its leaves. So start to paint some of this leaf litter with fulgrim pink, and after this glazing it with Carroburg crimson for the right base tone. And if you say, yeah, but the tree needs to be pinkish with this cherry blossoms, if there are some of those laying around on the floor, I say yes, maybe, but the whole miniature would be too pinkish if the treetop is in bloom right now, so this is a compromise of mine. Next up, use fulgrim pink again and paint two of the edges of the leaves and leave one on the oval back side in the base color. This is the pattern of a cherry blossom leaf. If you can't imagine it right now, just use a search engine and use close-up pictures as a reference. And now the previously painted pink edges are painted again with a small stripe of Uthwan gray, cause these cherry blossom leaves would turn white on the front edges of the leaf, so that those leaves look more natural. And then we are theoretically done. When you don't like to add green to the tree, only thing to do is paint some of the paper plant edges in a green tone. I use Death Guard green here, cause keep in mind this is printed paper and cut by a laser, and there is still a white edge showing through. And on the elephant's ear and the bracken, there is no white edge on the plant. These small lilies got white edges, so that you don't need to paint there. But to get the illusion perfect, just take your time and paint those edges a bit to remove this white sticking through. Then add a dried bark base or stand rim, and the miniature is done if you don't like clump foliage on your tree. This is the first time I've done this clump, so I've finished the miniature at first and stick some of those clumps onto the miniature and get a photo and let it tickle into my brain if it's okay, if it's fine. Look at the photo sometimes, and afterwards I decided, okay, I will add the clump to the miniature in a permanent bond, And then this is clump foliage from the miniature train building hobby. You can fiddle around on the tree where these clump pieces would fit perfectly, add a minor amount of super glue, and then fix those on the tree where you want them. We will glue them with white glue, with diluted white glue later. This is only the first step to fix the clumps where they are needed, that it looks the best. Of course, keep in mind, this is not only a train track where tiny miniatures are driving around on those small rails and the trains are the focusing point. This is miniature painting diorama where the miniature is the focus point. So these small clumps should be placed perfectly onto the miniature. So as the super glue is dried now completely, keep in mind chemical reaction, I dilute some white glue and apply it on all over this clump foliage. This would kinda melt down the surface and change the color tone a bit. If you're cool with it, you can leave it. I will dry brush, airbrush and stipple it later. This step could be done by a spray glue from the train model hobby ranges, like Woodland Scenics got something like this. I myself don't want to add this one so that I don't ruin the miniature, so I went with this. Leave it to dry for about 3 hours, and then I apply a mix of angel green and dunkelgrau from Vallejo to the bottom side of the leaves, so that I get a nice olive greenish shadow there, to give these rather natural looking clump foliage another more natural variation, like shadows. And where are shadows, there is light, so I hit up the upper parts with a color that's called Dead Flesh by Vallejo Game Air. It's called a Dead Flesh, but it's more like a greenish tone, a bright greenish tone, and I give it a slight hit up for some color variation there. Of course, if you look right on outside of your window and see some trees, you can see that the tree tops are not uniformly green. There is light flickering through. There are maybe some dead branches where are dead leaves within a fully vital tree, and so this is my way to mod it up a bit. And as a final touch-up, there will be some stippling with it is Nurgling green and a sponge, but before this I apply some Dead Flesh spray onto the branches here and there to give the some highlights on these areas where there is no clump foliage that can theoretically block out the light. And this is the finished miniature. I hope you liked the video. It was a bumpy ride. It was an experimental way to hit up a tutorial of a faction that I've never even painted one miniature before from. And if you got some inspiration or ideas, or want to share some thoughts on what you like the most, then hit me up in the comments below, and we see us on the next video for Conquest by Parabellum Wargames on my channel. Till then, I am Dizzyfinger, out for today. Keep on wargaming! Yo, yo, roll, roll, lie, lie, yo, yo, roll, roll, lie, lie. 嵐と聖なる日をくぐり抜けて神秘のせいで永遠の願い
chaos they will break every chain. Through the storm and the sacred fire, listening spirits, eternal desire, guardians of earth witnessing, in the legend forever free.